This film is based on a true story and starts in a medical commission room. That's where our main character, Mateusz, who has cerebral palsy, is wheeled in. Because of his condition, Mateusz can't even speak. Then the story jumps back to 1987, when Mateusz was still a kid. At the time, he was in a therapy room with a doctor. They were trying to fit shapes into the right slots. The doctor said Mateusz had an intellectual disability, but his mom immediately disagreed. She was convinced her son actually understood everything happening around him, but the doctor stood firm with his opinion, even comparing Mateusz's response to a dog wagging its tail when it sees food. That comparison clearly upset his mom. The doctor suggested putting Mateusz in a special institution so he could get professional care, but his mom still refused. She believed he was better off being cared for at home. At home, his mom kept trying to teach Mateusz how to stand and walk. But his siblings, his older brother and younger sister, thought it was all just a waste of time. Mateusz mostly crawled on the floor using his back, but he always stayed cheerful, especially when playing with his dad. They had this special bond that made even the small moments meaningful. His parents once called in a specialist to help with Mateusz's development, but after a few sessions, the specialist gave up. He said there was nothing more that could be done and even refused to be paid for the last visit. One day, his mom took Mateusz out of the house. While walking, she started feeling like all her efforts were pointless. But suddenly, Mateusz tried to say something. He tried to give a signal, and his mom had to guess what he meant. Frustrated because she couldn't figure out what he was trying to say, she ended up feeling tired and sad. Eventually, she just pushed Mateusz's wheelchair back home. At home, his dad taught him to hit the table with his fist, kind of a way to make Mateusz feel like a real man. From that moment, Mateusz made up his mind to learn as much as he could. He slowly crawled over to his mom, who was busy at the time. She immediately picked him up, even ignoring her daughter who also needed attention. All her focus was on Mateusz. After lunch, Mateusz sat by the window. From there, he watched the lives of the neighbors across the street. Through that window, he learned a lot about how people interact with each other. He observed everything and slowly took it all in. One day, their family got a package from an uncle in Germany. His dad worked hard to open it, and the whole family watched excitedly. From that moment, Mateusz learned that persistence pays off. He also started paying attention to how his mom treated the women who came over to try on new dresses. All of that became social lessons for him. One day, Mateusz was really into watching a space program on TV. But just as he was enjoying it, Matilda, his younger sister, suddenly turned the TV off. Mateusz got upset right away. Seeing him squirm, his mom blamed it all on the TV show. But Matilda casually said, "Mateusz doesn't even understand anything." Not long after, Matilda asked about her missing hair clip. Mateusz, who knew it had fallen under the sofa, tried to tell them. He crawled slowly while making sounds, trying to get everyone's attention. But no one really understood what he meant. In 1989, his dad took Mateusz to look at the night sky through the window. He told him stories about the stars. That night, there was a quiet and warm moment between the two of them. The next day, through his inner narration, Mateusz wondered what his dad had been working on. Turns out his dad was building a wheelchair for him using stuff from around the house. He used the frame from a folding bed and some random materials. That handmade wheelchair was given to Mateusz, and it became a gift full of meaning. As the country changed, when democracy started coming in and the socialist regime began to fall, his dad celebrated too. He said he was going to buy a new door lock, but instead, he went out drinking. That night, he came home drunk, climbed onto the balcony quietly, and knocked on Mateusz's window. When fireworks started shooting into the sky, his dad pointed to the stars exploding above. Mateusz stared at the glowing sky while listening to the blasts. But suddenly, his dad slipped and fell from the balcony. That same night, he died. Mateusz lost the most important figure in his life, but he never forgot his dad's last words. Never give up. Give. Jump to 1998. Mateusz, now a grown man, still liked sitting by the window. He enjoyed looking at the sky and sometimes stole glances at his neighbor, Anka. She lived with her kind mom, but different men came to their house almost every night. Meanwhile, Matilda, his older sister, was also looking for a husband. Sometimes she brought guys over. When that happened, they'd tell Mateusz to go into another room, but he could still hear everything through the closed door. One day, Mateusz's older brother took him outside. They walked around the yard, and his brother parked Mateusz's wheelchair near a park bench where Anka was sitting. Mateusz tried to get Anka's attention by moving his body, and it worked. Anka smiled and greeted him, then started chatting. From there, they began spending more time together. At first, they just sat on the bench reading books, but over time, they got closer and even started going out together. Anka, who was the one pushing the wheelchair Mateusz's dad had built, even took him to the zoo. They laughed together, enjoying the moment like the world never questioned Mateusz's condition. Inside one of the mirror houses at the amusement park, Mateusz noticed a bruise on Anka's thigh. Right away, he knew something wasn't right. One day from his window, Mateusz saw Anka trying to protect her mom from her new boyfriend. The guy looked aggressive, and he hit Anka. Mateusz couldn't just watch. He threw a flower pot at the guy from his window. He didn't hit him, but the message was clear. Mateusz wanted to help. Another time, the same guy was riding his bike past the house. Mateusz kicked some dirt at him. The guy got mad and mocked Mateusz for his condition. His crying caught the attention of a nearby police officer, who, as it turned out, was an old friend of his dad. The guy got more violent and ended up attacking the officer, but it didn't go far. He got handcuffed right there and then. That night, from his bedroom window, Mateusz saw Anka and her mom packing up their things. It was clear they were moving out. Anka glanced toward Mateusz's window, then ran across the yard. Mateusz stopped at the door, and through a small gap at the bottom, he said they were moving to their grandmother's house. Her mom's abusive boyfriend was now in jail, so there was no reason for them to stay anymore. In the year 2000, his older brother came back from naval service. By then, Matilda was married. They all gathered around the dinner table, chatting, laughing, and celebrating a small family reunion. In the middle of the conversation, the topic of Mateusz's future came up. Matilda asked directly, if one day their mom wasn't around anymore, who would take care of Mateusz? It was obvious that Matilda wasn't really ready or willing to take on that responsibility. Mateusz, meanwhile, still spent most of his time sitting at the window, staring out at the apartment yard. His life felt frozen there, just watching, never moving forward. Until one day, while his mom was helping him into the wheelchair, she collapsed to the floor. From that moment on, everything changed. She had to be hospitalized, and Mateusz was taken to a care facility. The place was crowded. People with all kinds of conditions lived there. The wards were packed, the air heavy. When he first arrived, some of the other residents came up to him. Mateusz stayed quiet. He still hoped his mom would come back and take him home. Days passed. Mateusz slowly got used to the place, but his heart never settled in. That place wasn't for him. It felt cold, foreign. Sometime later, his mom came to visit. She stood at the doorway of the ward for a long time before finally walking in. They spent a little time together, and then she said she had to go, to catch a train. Before leaving, she promised she'd come back on Monday. After that, Mateusz started to sink into depression. The staff there took care of him, but his heart felt empty. Until one day, a young girl showed up, a new volunteer. Her smile was warm, and her presence brought a bit of light into Mateusz's dark world. There was a short moment when Mateusz felt a little lighter, even if it was just from watching her from a distance. His mom still visited every now and then. She talked about his siblings, about how their lives were going. But beneath those stories, Mateusz held on to anger. There was a wound that hadn't healed. He felt abandoned. And that pain got worse when one day his mom fell from her wheelchair. After that incident, Mateusz was temporarily moved to a padded room. For safety, they put a boxing helmet on his head. But inside, he was falling apart. His depression got worse. While being fed lying down, Mateusz bit his own lip until it bled, just because his body was being treated like an object, not like a person. Even when they took him to the medical room, they restrained him in a dental chair, and all he could do was clench his teeth in frustration. On the way back to the ward, still filled with shame and pressure, Mateusz saw an opportunity. His caregiver got distracted. Without thinking, Mateusz pushed his wheelchair toward the stairs and let his body fall. At that moment, all he could remember were his dad's words. Sometimes, when you just can't take it anymore, the only thing you can do is slam your hand on the table. Toward the end of the year, a staff member brought a new volunteer to the ward where Mateusz stayed. Her name was Magda. Her visit had a simple purpose: to see what the place was really like, including meeting Mateusz, and decide for herself whether she wanted to continue volunteering or give up. Caught in his own thoughts, Mateusz started to reflect. Maybe all this time he'd been too focused on the physical. Maybe a woman's body wasn't the only thing that could be interesting. Magda started taking care of Mateusz, and from the beginning she noticed there were small responses from his body every time he tried to speak. Subtle movements, different expressions, little signals that showed Mateusz understood. One day, Magda played music in the ward. She started dancing by herself, telling the other patients that dancing was how she got rid of dark thoughts in her head. But unfortunately, her spontaneous moment got caught by one of the staff. The staff still weren't sure if Mateusz really understood things, but Magda was sure. She believed Mateusz wasn't just a silent body. She saw reactions. She felt a kind of communication, even without words. One day, while Mateusz was being bathed, he reacted to a magazine the male nurse was holding. Magda saw it. She started to feel even more certain. Mateusz knew what he was looking at, and Magda felt something. On Mateusz's 25th birthday, his mom came with a cake. Magda also showed up and asked for permission to take Mateusz out for a bit. Sometime after that, Magda came back to the ward late at night. She brought a gift, a magazine. She knew Mateusz was interested in it, and after confirming his reaction, she slowly took off her clothes and let Mateusz touch her. In that moment, there was no awkwardness, just silence and a feeling that was hard to explain. On Christmas Eve, Magda took Mateusz to her house. Her house was full of family, and she introduced Mateusz as her fiancé. Mateusz slowly started to realize, was all of this just Magda's way of rebelling against her father? Was he just being used? A while later, Mateusz was sitting near the window like usual. A staff member came and told him that Magda had quit volunteering. Her mission was considered complete. Mateusz stayed silent. He understood. He'd been left again. He turned on some music, forced a smile, trying to hide the painful disappointment. But deep inside, Mateusz knew he'd been used. A few days later, his mom came to visit. As usual, she talked about how his siblings were doing. When spring arrived in 2008, an outdoor theater performance was held for the residents. After the show, during a massage therapy session, Mateusz's attention was drawn to an older woman named Mrs. Yola. She had a unique way of teaching people with communication difficulties. Mrs. Yola taught them to communicate using signals while lying down or on their backs. Mateusz was instantly interested. He tried all sorts of ways to get Yola's attention. Eventually, she approached him and started talking gently, with calmness. From there, Yola began developing a special communication system just for Mateusz. It was simple, using signs and blinking, but it was enough to completely change his world. The responses and progress Mateusz showed shocked the medical staff. All this time, they thought he didn't understand anything. They assumed he was just a silent, helpless body. Turns out they were completely wrong. Not long after that, Mrs. Yola invited Mateusz's mom and sister to come to the facility. The goal was clear, to teach them how to communicate with Mateusz using the new communication system she'd introduced. And the first thing Mateusz said using the communication board was just one simple sentence. But from that sentence, everything started to change. From that day on, Mateusz's life slowly took a new direction. A dentist came and helped make dentures to replace the teeth he had worn down. Then Mateusz was moved to a private room, one that was tailored to his needs, quieter and more comfortable. That's not all. Mateusz also got an electric wheelchair. Now he could move on his own without anyone's help. For Mateusz, it wasn't just about being able to get around, it was about having control over his body and his life. In 2010, a journalist came to visit and was interested in writing a story about Mateusz's life. Around the same time, Mateusz was introduced to computers and the internet. A world that had always been closed to him was now slowly opening up. He could talk to more people, express his thoughts. One day, his sister invited him home to meet his nephew. They also got together with their older brother, who was home on leave. That night, Mateusz sat by the window with his nephew, looking up at the starry sky, just like he used to do with his dad. A few weeks later, his mom came to the facility again, but this time she brought tough news. Turns out, the article about Mateusz had been read by the administration. And after learning that Mateusz didn't have an intellectual disability like they had always assumed, they said he no longer qualified to stay there. Mateusz had to be moved somewhere else. The film then returns to the opening scene, Mateusz being brought before the medical commission. He actually had a chance to prove he was capable, but he didn't want to. He deliberately acted out and behaved strangely as Mrs. Yola pushed his wheelchair out of the room. But halfway down the hall, Mateusz suddenly stopped. Slowly, he got out of the wheelchair. With all the strength he had left, Mateusz crawled back into the room, turned himself around, and began to stand up. He rose, struggling, but stood and walked slowly toward the commission table. Every step was heavy, but they were the most important steps of his life. The next scene shows Mrs. Yola pushing Mateusz's wheelchair down the hallway of the facility, greeting other patients with similar conditions. They were his companions, people who had lived with him for years. Then, in the final scene, Mateusz is in his private room. He moves his electric wheelchair toward a telescope and looks at the sky. And before the film truly ends, Mateusz turns toward the camera. His eyes lock in, sharp, straight at the audience.